Horror films I must watch every Halloween. If you didn't know, I'm Adrian Alex Poe, and everyone has their list of the best or scariest horror films ever. But I'm talking about the nostalgic list of scary movies you just have to watch every October to get yourself in the mood for Halloween. Whether it's the old school black and white monster movies or Hammer films, the classic 80s slasher horror marathon on AMC Fear Fest, or your favorite childhood cartoons the whole family would watch together. And for me, Halloween has not officially arrived until I see all the horror films on my list. Let's check it out. First, let's start with some horrifying mentions. The fun and gory vampire film From Dusk Till Dawn, starring George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino. Next is House of Wax Remake. It's one of the most creepiest films and well done remakes. Then every time Child's Play comes on TV, I have to watch it. Now, I'm not a big fan of zombie movies, but I'm a huge fan of the original black and white 1968 zombie film Night of the Living Dead. Next is Once Bitten, a cheesy 80s vampire comedy starring a young Jim Carrey in his very first leading role. Next up is the dark demonic film Constantine. Then, for some strange reason, I have to include Alien Resurrection. Maybe it has a cozy atmosphere. Then comes one of my favorite films, An American Werewolf in London. Next is the fantasy film Legend, which is supposed to be for kids, but has some dark and graphic scenes. Plus, I have a huge crush on Mia Sara, who was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Next is a very random and kind of bad film, but for some reason, I have to watch Graveyard Shift, about a giant killer mutant rat. Then the campy Kevin Bacon film Tremors. And finally, even though it's not St. Patrick's Day, Leprechaun, starring a pre-Friends sitcom very hot Jennifer Aniston. Now let's get to the main list. So the obvious thing I had to start with, even though there is no particular order, is the Halloween movie marathon. Everyone must watch the original 1978 John Carpenter film Halloween. With Michael Myers stabbing his sister to death as a kid, he escapes from the mental institution and returns back to his old neighborhood after 15 years to kill again. It includes all the memorable characters like Laurie Strode and Dr. Loomis, not to mention the iconic music score. Next is Halloween 2, where Michael Myers follows Laurie to the hospital and continues his murder spree. Then Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Many people hate this one because it doesn't have Michael Myers, but I actually like the change of story about the killer masks. In Halloween 4, Michael Myers returns, and somehow Dr. Loomis survived too. Plus, we are introduced to a young Danielle Harris, followed by Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, again with Danielle Harris. Next comes Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, about the strange cult. Halloween Resurrection is not included in my list. I might watch it with a group of friends to laugh and make fun about how horrible it is, but alone, it's unwatchable, and I have to change the channel every time it's on. After that, I must watch Halloween H2O. Compared to Resurrection, H2O is a masterpiece. Finally, most fans will call this sacrilege, but I have to include Rob Zombie's remake of Halloween. Sure, it makes you sympathetic to Michael Myers, but it's violent and visceral. Plus, it includes an all grown up, hotter Danielle Harris. One of my favorite black and white horror films is 1959 The Tingler, starring the great Vincent Price. A fun, campy gimmick film about a creature that feeds off fear, and the only way to kill it is to scream as loud as you can. However, I love watching any and all Vincent Price horror films on Halloween. Other classics like the original 1953 House of Wax, starring a young Charles Bronson, the original Fly, House on Haunted Hill, or any of the on-screen adaptations of Edgar Allan Poe's stories like The Pit and the Pendulum and The Raven, with a very young Jack Nicholson, just to name a few. Now, a true horror fan must watch some of the classic Hammer films for Halloween. All the classic movie monsters like Frankenstein and his bride, the Wolfman, the Mummy, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Invisible Man, Phantom of the Opera, and of course, Dracula. Even if you're not a hardcore horror fan like me, definitely check out these classics this Halloween. Another classic 80s slasher franchise is the Friday the 13th movie marathon, about a hockey mask wearing, machete wielding killer on the loose at Camp Crystal Lake out for revenge. We start with the original Friday the 13th, which had one of the best twists and jump scare endings ever. Then Friday the 13th Part 2, where we introduce Jason wearing a potato sack on his head for a mask. Next is Friday the 13th 3D, which was actually in 3D, and Jason put on his iconic hockey mask. Finally, I have to watch Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, with the young Corey Feldman going toe to toe with Jason. I will still watch the rest of the Friday the 13th films, even the horrible reboot, but none compare to the first four films to me. One of my favorite films I have to watch every Halloween is the original 1981 Evil Dead with Ash and his chainsaw arm. This film has a mixture of comedy, creepiness, blood and gore, and cheesy one-liners that are so bad, they're classic. Then I skip the underwhelming sequel and go straight to Evil Dead 3, Army of Darkness. Again, every time the movie is on TV, I have to watch it. Ash is transported back to medieval times, armed with a new metal hand and his witty, cheesy one-liners. The film tries a lot of different special effects techniques like clunky stop-motion animation, poor CGI, and obvious green screen backgrounds, but it all works for the film and gets me in the Halloween spirit. Now, my list of must-see Halloween films wouldn't be complete without my personal favorite horror film of all time, The Exorcist. This movie traumatized me as a kid after the first time I saw it, and only made it halfway through the film before I had to turn it off. Since then, I've seen it over hundreds of times, not just on Halloween, but it wouldn't feel like October until I see the head-spinning scene. And once in a while, I still might get a nightmare or two after I see the little girl's possessed demonic face. The next film is The Shining, which is scary enough on any other month of the year, but on Halloween, it's extra scary. Jack Nicholson was born to play this role, with his iconic one-liners like, "Here's Johnny," and so many classic scenes like the old lady in the bathtub, the creepy twin little girls, and the bloody elevator scene, not to mention the creepy kid who says, "Red rum," and the ominous twist ending. Then comes Pet Sematary, which to me is one of the scariest movies ever, about an Indian burial ground where you bury your dead pets or relatives and they come back alive, but all evil. We get a possessed cat, a creepy killer toddler, and the scariest flashback scene that every time I watch, I must turn my head away in fear. Next is the classic 1987 film Hellraiser with the iconic villain Pinhead. It really stands out from other 80s slasher films. It's more of a sci-fi supernatural meets death metal demonic nightmare. It has some of the best makeup effects I have ever seen. Another John Carpenter film I must watch is the 1982 The Thing remake, starring Kurt Russell, about an alien life form that replicates any human it comes in contact with. I still get tense every time I watch the blood testing scene, even though I know which of the humans is the alien. I have to also include the classic 80s slasher Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy Krueger and his gloved knives. After watching it for the first time as a kid, I really believed if I fell asleep, Freddy would kill me in my dreams, so I stayed up for days before I couldn't stay awake any longer. But it's not Halloween until I stay up to watch all these films. And finally, the last group of films I must watch at Halloween are part of a long tradition going back to my childhood. First is the family film Hocus Pocus, about three witches summoned back from the dead by a young teenage boy and his little sister. As a kid, I had a huge crush on Vanessa Shaw. Trust me, look her up. Also, it wasn't until many years later that I realized one of the witches was a younger, much hotter Sarah Jessica Parker from Sex and the City. Next is one of my favorite cartoons to watch on Halloween, The Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. Ever since I was introduced to Snoopy and the Peanuts Gang as a kid, I haven't missed one Halloween without watching this film. Remember Charlie Brown's ghost costume with too many eye holes? And poor Linus waiting all night for the great pumpkin to arrive, but nobody believes he exists. Maybe he will show up next year. And finally, I must watch the 1987 vampire film The Lost Boys, starring Kiefer Sutherland, who also played the perfect 80s punk vampire, and the Corey brothers, not to be confused with the Frog brothers from the film. To this day, I still have a major crush on Jamie Gertz, who is still smoking hot. This isn't your sissy tweener emo, Twilight boring soap opera crap. I think this film still holds up even today and every Halloween. So what did you think of my Halloween must-see horror film list? Did I forget to mention any? Let me know in the comments your list of scary movies you must watch every October to get in the mood for the Halloween season.